The road stretched out through darkness, lit only by headlights. The car was headed from Santo Domingo toward Casablanca Beach, located in the Esmeraldas province. Inside were three young women, Denise Reina, Juliana Masías, and Naeli Tapia. They had planned to spend a few days by the sea, but the trip no longer felt carefree. Night deepened into silence. At 11:06 p.m., Denise sent a message to her friend. "I have a bad feeling." She hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. But the last status on the message remained delivered. Later, the friend would say she hadn't realized how serious the tone was at that moment. Almost at the same time, Naeli enabled location sharing on her phone and sent her coordinates to her sister. On the map, she saw the marker moving along the highway, until the car veered off the main road and turned toward a rural back road. Minutes later, the signal disappeared. Inside the car, a tense silence reigned. Juliana tried calling friends, but the calls wouldn't go through. The network was dropping. The phones showed no signal, and outside there was no trace of light from nearby towns. The last recorded activity on their devices was about 11:15 p.m. After that, no texts, no calls, no location updates. The car vanished from the highway, and with it, all contact was cut. That night became the beginning of a story that would emerge as one of the most horrifying crimes in modern Ecuador's history. Before the tragedy in Esmeraldas, the three friends from Santo Domingo had lived ordinary lives full of hopes. Their bond was measured in years of close friendship, shared dreams, and the firm belief that their best days were ahead. Juliana Masías, 21, graduated from the Xyla Institute in Transportation Engineering. She had excelled in her studies, was honored as valedictorian, and earned deep respect from her professors. Juliana was known for being responsible and hardworking. Beyond school, she was passionate about music under the stage name Syria. She took vocal lessons, performed at local venues, and shared her songs on social media, determined to build a singing career on her own without the help of producers. Denise Reina, 19, had set her sights on becoming a veterinarian, having cared for stray animals since childhood. Her dream was to open her own clinic to help those who could not voice their pain. Lately, she had been planning a move to the US to complete her education and begin a new life closer to her friend. Her loved ones remembered her as calm, composed, and dependable. Naeli Tapia, 22, was raising a 4-year-old daughter. After a period of searching for stable work in Quito, she had begun a modeling career, doing shoots and considering a move to Spain. Her primary goal was securing a safe future for her child. She combined persistence with kindness, qualities that had helped her navigate life's challenges. Despite the distance and their busy schedules, Juliana, Denise, and Naeli kept in constant touch. They messaged almost daily, sharing news, life updates, and making plans for the future. What united them was a shared belief that success could be achieved through hard work and mutual support. That same belief made them inseparable, up until their final trip together. In early April 2023, back in Santo Domingo, Denise Reina met up with Luis Fernando Vaca, someone she'd known for several years. During their meeting, Vaca suggested a short getaway to the coast, specifically to the Esmeraldas province, with a stay planned in the tourist zone of Casablanca. He explained it would be a simple road trip lasting a few days and invited Denise to bring her friends along. Denise didn't agree right away. She told him she needed to talk it over with Juliana Masías and Naeli Tapia to figure out dates, trip length, where they'd stay, and who else would be coming. She made it clear that she wouldn't commit without first discussing everything with her friends. Vaca reassured her it would be a straightforward trip, daytime travel, beach time, and returning within the agreed time frame. No extra conditions. After the meeting, Denise reached out to Juliana and Naeli. She shared the idea of heading to Casablanca for a brief vacation, with lodging in a hotel district and a casual vibe overall. She mentioned that some of Vaca's acquaintances were also expected to join, and emphasized that the trip would be nothing more than a beach getaway. No packed itinerary, nothing fancy. Juliana said she'd be able to go for a few days. Naeli began working out logistics on her end, including finding someone to care for her child while she was away. Next, Denise informed her family, She said there was a proposal to spend a few days at the beach, that it would be a quick trip with a prompt return. She noted that nothing was final yet. She needed full agreement from her friends and to sort out some organizational details. As a reference point, she mentioned Casablanca, a well-known resort area in Esmeraldas, typically reached from Santo Domingo by car. The three friends continued discussing the trip non-stop, what to pack, who would meet where, and how things would unfold. There were no red flags. The route was familiar. The idea sounded like a standard weekend escape. Eventually, they all agreed they were going. Denise told Vaca she wouldn't be coming alone. Juliana and Naeli would be joining her, and confirmed that they were ready to head out soon. At that point, everyone involved had the same understanding of what the trip was supposed to be. Neither in their chats nor in any conversations were there odd requests, changes to the route, or anything that stood out as unusual. The date was set, the first week of April. The decision was made and the departure confirmed. On the morning of April 4th, Denise Reina left her home in Santo Domingo. Later that day, Naeli Tapia joined her, having traveled in from Quito to spend time with her close friends. After taking care of a few things during the day, the friends returned to Denise's house. Their plan for the evening was set. They were heading to the coast. That evening, a black Chevrolet Sail pulled up in front of the house. Behind the wheel was Luis Fernando Vaca. Denise and Naeli got into the car. Then they picked up Juliana Masías, and with that, the group was complete. At the same time, another vehicle was making its way in the same direction. Inside were Andres Zambrano and Amar Ardaños. Their departure happened to line up with the groups, and at several points along the highway, the two cars were seen traveling close to one another, maintaining visual contact on stretches of the road. The route from Santo Domingo to Casablanca was well known and straightforward. A federal highway leading out of the city and then connecting to a coastal road. Under normal conditions, the drive would take about 4 hours without major stops. Fuel levels were checked, phones were charged, and cell service was available. Luis Fernando Vaca remained behind the wheel of the Chevrolet Sail. At departure, there were no issues with the car or paperwork. On the morning of April 5th, the families of Denise, Juliana, and Naeli stopped receiving replies. Their messages on apps went unread, and phone calls never connected. Instead of a quick, "We made it" from Casablanca, chats remained silent. By midday on April 5th, each family launched their own search for answers. They started calling friends the girls had been in touch with the night before, trying to piece together when they left Santo Domingo and whether they made any known stops. But no one had heard from them since late the previous evening. Call logs showed only repeated failed attempts to reach them. Naeli's sister checked the location sharing feature on her phone and saw the last signal had come in late on April 4th, and then nothing. No updates, no movement. That was the first red flag, a sign that something was seriously wrong. The families shared the location screenshots with each other and began preserving every detail. By the evening of April 5th, their efforts joined into one. They created a timeline of the girls' last known communications, mapped out their expected route, and compiled detailed descriptions of their appearance, what they were wearing, and the phones they were using. Together, they decided to report the disappearance to police and simultaneously began spreading the word on social media. On the morning of April 6th, attorney Paulina Rueda, Juliana's aunt, officially filed a missing persons report with the National Police. The report included the girls' names, ages, city of departure, Santo Domingo, the expected route toward the coast, the time of last contact, and emergency contact information for the families. The case was registered as urgent. As soon as the report was filed, search efforts began. Police sent alerts to stations along the route, checked hospitals and emergency care centers, and notified checkpoint units on the main roads leading toward Esmeraldas. The families were asked to immediately report any new information and to keep all message history intact. At the same time, the public search began. Relatives and friends created social media posts with photos of Denise, Juliana, and Naeli, along with their last known location and contact numbers. These posts quickly spread through community pages in Santo Domingo and groups focused on the Esmeraldas coast. Volunteers stepped in, offering to help monitor incoming messages and organize the information. By midday on April 6th, the families had gathered key details: the girls' last confirmed actions, the moment when Naeli's location updates stopped, and the repeated failed attempts to reach them. There was still no contact. All collected data was given to the lead investigator, and both sides agreed to keep exchanging information as it came in. By the evening of April 6th, uncertainty remained. There were no police reports along the highway and no medical records clearly connected to the missing women. Communication channels stayed open and group chats remained active. Everyone knew that the next day, any sign could become the breakthrough. On the afternoon of April 7th, fishermen near the Esmeraldas River in the Quininde area noticed a dog persistently digging at the edge of the brush. When they checked the spot, they found a partially buried body. Police arrived, secured the area, and began excavations. A short distance from the first location, 2 more bodies were discovered. All 3 victims were women. Their clothing suggested they had likely been at the beach. Light outfits, beachwear. All 3 had their hands bound and their mouths were covered with tape. A preliminary external examination revealed multiple injuries indicating prolonged abuse: bruises, abrasions, and rope marks. Each of them had deep cuts on the neck area, likely caused by a machete or another heavy-edged tool. The facial soft tissue showed severe damage. The bodies were transported to the morgue for forensic examination and identification. The families were officially notified of the tragedy. Identification was carried out using a combination of features: body structure, clothing items, tattoos, and other distinguishing marks. The extent of the injuries complicated the process, especially in one case. Relatives noted that the face had been severely disfigured, so they relied on physical features below the head. The forensic examination revealed that all 3 victims suffered a combination of sharp force and stab wounds, head and limb injuries, and signs of prolonged restraint. The official cause of death for each was deep wounds to the neck, resulting in massive blood loss. One of the victims, Denise Reina, had a deep cut across the palm of her hand and a severe blow to her forearm. These were classified as defensive injuries. Juliana Masías showed multiple contusions to her face and chest, including trauma from a blunt object. Naeli Tapia had sustained mixed injuries to her torso and limbs, along with signs of intense compression around her wrists. Based on the physical evidence and personal identifiers, the victims were officially confirmed to be Denise Reina, Juliana Masías, and Naeli Tapia. The expert reports included detailed descriptions of the injuries, estimated time of death, and a list of collected biological samples for comparative testing. Investigators also documented the condition of the clothing and restraints, along with microtraces found on the skin and fabric. After completing the initial forensic procedures, all materials were handed over to the lead investigator, following standard legal protocols. The families were notified of the identification results and briefed on the next steps. At this point, the investigation had a starting framework: a confirmed location where the bodies were found, verified identities of the victims, and objective forensic evidence pointing to a brutal crime. A critical lead in the investigation came from the location data Naeli Tapia had shared with her sister the night she disappeared. Investigators seized the recipient's phone and accessed the geolocation log. The data showed movement late into the evening of April 4th before the signal abruptly stopped. The final recorded location matched the same area where the bodies were discovered on April 7th near the Esmeraldas River. Comparing timestamps and the last known attempts at communication, authorities determined that the location updates ceased shortly after the vehicle veered off the main highway toward the coast. Investigators then shifted focus to surveillance footage from the roadways connecting Santo Domingo to the rural villages on the outskirts of the tourist region. Security cameras on private homes and small businesses captured footage of a 2-vehicle convoy. A black Chevrolet Sail and another car were seen traveling closely together. Several frames clearly showed the black Chevrolet, its make, color, and body type all matched records from a local rental agency. A request sent to the rental company confirmed that this Chevrolet Sail had been rented a few days prior to the trip under the name Holger Zambrano, with pickup and return dates matching the suspected timeline. Further investigation confirmed that on April 4th, the car was being driven by Luis Fernando Vaca. This was corroborated both by witness statements and visual comparisons between the driver seen in the footage and Vaca's known appearance. The vehicle's path was cross-checked against the expected route to Casablanca. Surveillance footage shows the convoy turning off the main highway at an intersection, heading into a more remote area, and eventually onto a dirt road. Around the same time, Naeli's location tracking stopped, a key moment that indicates the group wasn't heading toward the coastal resort area, but instead into an isolated region that later connected to the river where the bodies were found. A few days after the bodies were discovered, the black Chevrolet Sail was located in Santo Domingo with damage consistent with a recent collision. Forensic analysis using luminol and rapid blood detection tests revealed traces of biological fluids in both the passenger area and the trunk. Additionally, investigators found a fingernail fragment lodged between a plastic panel and the dashboard seal, a fragment that, based on physical characteristics, was preliminarily linked to Denise Reina. All biological samples, including swabs, fabric particles, and the nail fragment, were collected and properly logged. The analysis led investigators to several critical conclusions. The absence of blood at the river site, the presence of biological evidence inside the car, and the match between the last location signal and the point where the vehicles turned off the main road. Together, this evidence strongly suggested that the violent acts did not occur at the riverbank, but rather during transit or at a stop along the way, most likely inside the rented Chevrolet Sail. This scenario became the central working theory and shaped the direction of the ongoing investigation. Authorities quickly identified a group of suspects tied to the disappearance of Denise Reina, Juliana Masías, and Naeli Tapia, Luis Fernando Vaca, Holger Zambrano, Andres Zambrano, and Amar Ardaños. All four were traveling the same route as the girls and were known to be connected. Luis Fernando Vaca emerged as a key figure. He was a friend of Denise and had proposed the trip to the beach, organized the logistics, and drove the vehicle the girls were in. Investigators confirmed Vaca's connection to the other suspects through messages and the coordinated movement of both vehicles. Holger Zambrano had rented the black Chevrolet Sail, a crucial detail, as without his involvement, the trip in that vehicle wouldn't have been possible. He maintained communication with Vaca and coordinated movements between the two cars. His role extended beyond simply renting the vehicle. He appeared to be part of the broader plan. Andres Zambrano, Holger's brother, was traveling separately from Vaca, but accompanied by Amar Ardaños. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts confirmed that their vehicle was on the same route and maintained close distance behind the car with the girls, a clear sign of coordinated action. Amar Ardaños, an associate of both Zambrano and Vaca, was part of the second car that moved in sync with the one carrying the girls during the critical time frame. What connected these men to the victims? All four had direct involvement with the women and the planning of the trip. Luis Fernando Vaca was the central figure. He was in contact with Denise, extended the invitation, suggested the route, and provided transportation. The Zambrano brothers and Ardaños were close associates of his and helped coordinate logistics. That meant all four had access to the women and control over the flow of the trip. From there, investigators began developing two working theories about motive and how the crime unfolded. Theory 1. A violent outburst triggered by rejection. Attorney Paulina Rueda, Juliana's aunt, suggested the incident may have been sparked by a confrontation following the women's refusal of unwanted advances. This theory points to coercion and aggression, not any romantic entanglement. It also offers an explanation for the sudden escalation and brutality of the attack, given the nature of the injuries. Theory 2. A premeditated act. The victims' families pointed to several signs of planning: the presence of a second vehicle for surveillance, the diversion from the tourist route, efforts to conceal evidence, and, most notably, the size of the burial site. They believed it would have been difficult to dig such a pit spontaneously at night, implying the burial site may have been prepared in advance. This theory also aligned with the staged nature of the abandoned and damaged rental car discovered later in the city. A separate rumor about acid use was ruled out by forensic experts, as no chemical traces were found. At that stage, investigators did not officially favor either theory. Both aligned with the established facts: the shared route, the suspect's connections, control over transportation, and timing. What mattered most was that each of the four men had both the opportunity and the means to carry out the crime, whether individually or together with assigned roles. On May 29th, Ecuador's Attorney General's office and national police arrested brothers Holger and Andres Zambrano near the border with Peru. Border agents reported that the two were attempting to flee the country. Arrest warrants had been issued based on surveillance footage, vehicle rental records, and call logs. The suspects were taken to a nearby station for questioning and later transferred into custody. Officials confirmed that the escape attempt occurred during the peak of the manhunt for those connected to the murders of Denise Reina, Juliana Masías, and Naeli Tapia. Weeks later, a disturbing update emerged. Authorities recovered the remains of Luis Fernando Vaca in Chimborazo province. Forensic analysis showed the body had been dismembered and the cause of death was the result of violent trauma. Experts concluded that Vaca had died in April, shortly after the disappearance of the three women. This meant that the key figure, the driver of the vehicle that night, and a potential witness, had been killed before police began making arrests. According to attorney Paulina Rueda, Vaca's parents had received threats and were forced to leave the country. The family believed he had been planning to testify about what happened on the night of April 4th, and that his murder was an attempt to silence him before the truth could come out. The search for Amar Ardaños took significantly longer. He had been hiding out, frequently changing locations, and avoiding places he used to visit. In November 2023, he was finally apprehended. During questioning, it was discovered that he had ties to the criminal group Los Lobos and had prior convictions for illegal possession of firearms. His connection to organized crime reinforced the theory that this was a coordinated act involving multiple people and deliberate efforts to cover their tracks. Once the core group of suspects had been identified and key evidence established, the legal classification of the case was revised. Prosecutors reclassified it from femicide to homicide. The official reasoning was clear. There was no romantic or familial relationship between the victims and the accused, and therefore, the legal definition of femicide did not apply. This shift had major implications, requiring a restructuring of the charges and changing the potential penalties. The families of Denise Reina, Juliana Masías, and Naeli Tapia saw this as an attempt to downplay the severity of the crime. They issued public statements asserting that the brutality of the violence pointed to a gender-based motive. Their argument was backed by forensic findings that documented signs of torture, restraint, and deep lacerations, as well as the fact that the suspects had maintained control over the girls' movements. Attorney Paulina Rueda stressed that a lack of romantic ties does not rule out gender-based violence, especially if the crime was committed because of the victim's gender. She maintained that coercion, rejection, and the subsequent aggression fell within the legal framework for a gender-motivated killing. In her view, downgrading the charge weakened the protective power of the law and undermined efforts to defend women against systemic violence. The prosecution's decision sparked public backlash. Women's advocacy groups, human rights defenders, and local communities organized protests and launched online campaigns calling for the original charge of femicide to be reinstated. They demanded full transparency in presenting the evidence and argued that the gender aspect of the motive had to be taken into account. Amid the growing public pressure, both sides prepared additional reports and clarifications. However, the official charge remained homicide, which ultimately shaped the structure of the trial and the sentencing framework. The families vowed to continue pushing for the acknowledgement of the gender-based nature of the crime and a broader reconsideration of how such cases are classified. On April 9, 2024, in the Esmeraldas province, the first court hearing in the murder case was held. The defendants were Andres Zambrano and Amar Ardaños. The role of Holger Zambrano, who had rented the vehicle, was reviewed in a separate proceeding. The court opened with the reading of formal charges and a summary of the evidence accepted for review. Prosecutors presented forensic and autopsy reports confirming the nature of the injuries and the manner of death. Additional material included biological and trace evidence tied to the rented Chevrolet sale, along with footage from surveillance cameras. Employees from the rental agency were called to testify, and witnesses identified one of the suspects in the company of one of the victims before the group departed. The defense centered its argument on placing full responsibility for the crime on the late Luis Fernando Vaca. Attorneys claimed that Vaca had been in charge of the route and could have acted alone in committing the violent acts. They argued that the evidence presented failed to directly implicate the other defendants. Motions were filed to exclude certain video footage and to rule biological samples inadmissible due to potential contamination. The court denied these motions, citing proper handling and preservation of all evidence. As for Holger Zambrano, the court found no proof of his presence at the crime scene or direct involvement in the violence. His role, according to the ruling, was limited to renting the vehicle. As a result, Holger Zambrano was acquitted on those charges. On May 17, 2024, the court found Andres Zambrano and Amara Daños guilty of murder. They were each sentenced to 34 years and 8 months in prison. The verdict was based on a combination of forensic reports, travel route data, testimony from the rental agency, and eyewitness accounts, which the court deemed sufficient for conviction. Despite the sentencing, the families of the victims felt no sense of closure. Legally, the case had reached a conclusion, but emotionally and morally, there were still many unanswered questions. What exactly led to the crime? Were other people involved? How much was covered up? Attorney Paulina Rueda, who represented the families and advocated on behalf of Juliana Masías, continued her pursuit of justice. She kept gathering new evidence, believing it could expand the list of suspects. She also spoke out in the media, pointing to investigative failures and pushing for the case to be reclassified as a gender-motivated crime. In June 2024, Paulina reported surveillance activity near her home. A month later, she began receiving threats via phone calls and messages. She went to the police, but no protective action was taken. In August, tragedy struck. Her son was killed. Although authorities categorized it as a domestic incident, the family believed it was connected to Paulina's work on the case involving Denise, Juliana, and Naeli. Weeks later, Paulina herself went missing. She suddenly stopped answering messages and calls. Given her role as a lawyer, human rights advocate, and the family's legal representative, and in light of earlier threats, police launched a large-scale search. 2 days later, Paulina was found in the Tasagua area in the Manabí province. She was taken to a medical facility in stable condition. She later returned home to Santo Domingo. The reasons behind her abduction were never made public. Several theories circulated, but none were officially confirmed. What is clear is that she survived, but her disappearance was real, serious, and likely connected to her work on the triple murder case. 2 years after the bodies were discovered, on April 7, 2025, a private memorial was held near the Esmeraldas River. On a stone placed by volunteers were etched the names Denise Reina, Juliana Masías, and Naeli Tapia. Each year, women, activists, and journalists gather at that spot. They light candles and tie white ribbons, not only to honor the memory of the 3 victims, but to remind the world that the fight for truth must continue until all questions are answered.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.